Hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Be More podcast. I'm Brittany.
I'm Maria, and today, actually, I think I know what I want to talk about.
Okay, cool.
So, Associate Justice Ruth Bader
I
Ginsberg.
knew this. I literally was like, we're going to end up here anyway, so it's still, and I was like, it's fine. I'll just let it happen.
Rest in peace. There's a lot happening in American politics right now that, like, there's there's a lot. There's a documentary from CNN that they filmed 2 years ago, or they released 2 years ago, that's on Hulu, called RBG. Have you seen it?
I have not.
It's like an hour and a half long. Me and Kate watched it last night. It's basically like how she got into the Supreme Court and like her life. Basically, it's like a biography thing. But I was talking to my sister, and I feel like education on the Supreme Court, well, education on civics in general, and like our general government functionality is like that. But I had to explain to her what the Supreme Court does and like how it functions, and I'm just like, ugh. This is the problem with like America right now, is like, especially during an election year, like no one knows what the hell is happening and how our government functions.
Yeah.
So, but in essence, I think with her passing away and like there's a vacant seat in the Supreme Court, like there's a lot of debate on whether or not a nominee should,
right,
like,
who should have the right
nominated.
to fill it.
Yeah. My thought is... Oh, go ahead.
Tell me this first, and then I want to ask you a question.
My thought is, Mitch McConnell back in 2016, when Justice Scalia, rest his soul, honestly, in 2016, passed away during an election year, Mitch McConnell and a couple, I don't know if it was him and like a couple other Republicans, but I just remember it was him, said that there shouldn't be a nominee up during an election year. It should go to the next president, like the vacancy in the Supreme Court. So we're seeing that again, but I have a feeling that they're gonna go back on their word to try and get this
what?
bill.
This presidency has never done that before. What are you talking about?
That's I think that as early as next week is what I heard. He's gonna put up a nominee.
That's terrifying.
But I will add though, last thing, Obama did nominate someone during 2016, but the Senate sat on it. Like, they didn't vote on the nominee, and they only voted on, when Trump came into presidency, his nomination. So it was literally just like Obama put out a nomination, but never went anywhere.
Right.
So
I know that she had specific wishes that she wanted. Do you know what they were? I had just heard that. Yeah.
I heard that her granddaughter, I think, said that her grandma wanted her seat to be vacant until the next president comes in. That was her wish, but I mean, that's just her wish. The government can do it.
I know. That's what I was just saying. I was like curious to know what it was. At the end of the day, what's so frustrating is that we just have to watch.
Yeah, we wait it out.
But like, that's like the only thing that we have influence on is potentially the person who gets to be in the presidential seat.
We also have the power to change Congress, but I don't think anyone votes. I don't want to generalize. Not a lot of people vote during congressional elections compared to...
It's already too late for us to say something about this. Like, everything that we've said up until this point has put us in the situation that we're in. Like all the decisions that people have been making collectively for this country have put us in the situation we're in. And now it's too late for us to say there's like no action that we can take as the people. Like, we literally just have to sit back and watch what happens. And not saying there isn't any action, but you know what I mean? Like, in terms of like the right like to right. It's like kind of like that sentiment.
Yeah.
And then it's also like the opposite side of that, where it's like a lot can happen in the next couple of months. At the same time, I really don't. I feel like every other presidential election, and I guess it never really matters what I think, because things can go in a totally different direction. But I feel like you always have an idea. Like, I always in my head, or it wasn't you know that we could survive
Either
based
way.
on like, right, like whatever happens, like
I had the
whoever
same
becomes
conversation with
president,
someone else. Yeah. Yeah.
it would be fine.
Yeah. Like,
But
will
I
they
feel
make
like,
policies that I like or dislike? Sure, but at least like I know the country won't go to shit.
right, and like that's just been the whole way of the presidential elections always, right? Like someone
Yeah,
always
because
wins, someone always loses, the country always
whoever
goes
wins
on.
usually is moderate.
They don't come with so much depth to controversy attached to them. You
Right,
know, like
right.
there's a couple things you're all like that, but like at the end of the day, you're like, okay, we can, it's fine. Because at the end of the day, right, the people who understand the way that our government works knows that like they are just really the head of the snake,
Mm-hmm.
right? But like
Yeah.
knowing what the other areas of government do, we understand that those are the neck, right? And like
Correct.
that
Yeah.
we can have some sanity in knowing that, okay, like these people can deal with this person, and you're like, whatever. But like
Yeah.
from what we've seen and now what's going to be happening, like what stands on the line, I'm very nervous about what could happen if one person wins. You know what I mean? Like there's more at
Yeah.
stake almost, and like
Right.
there's a lot more concern attached to it, especially with the pivotal point of, you know, having this powerhouse who's not there, and like you getting to fill a seat
For yeah, for and
for
like
that position.
if it's a young person, like they'll be there for decades, for generations, you know?
And if
Like
that's what's more concerning, is if it's a young person who's in the pocket of our current president,
yeah.
like that's just gonna get worse over the
Well, he
decade. You know what
already
I mean? Like the
and he appointed two already during his presidency.
well, that's why I
So
saw like a bunch of stuff on social media that was like, well, that's like people who are like, well, we won. Like, doesn't matter what happens in the next couple months. Once this person gets
yeah.
gets the seat, and like, once this person makes a decision about who gets the seat, like it doesn't matter what happens at elections. And I'm like, this is
I don't
like
think
it's
I
just
it's frustrating because uh it's again like I don't know if people know the significance of the court system. Like I or like because all we see is the president. Like forget about Congress right now. Like I feel like all we see is the president. Like
yeah.
I
Oh
bet
yeah.
you if I can like grab 10 people from the street, I don't know if they know I don't even know our representative. Like that's how bad I am
I
with
don't either.
congressional
I don't
seats.
either. Nope.
Like like I'm like a little bit knowledgeable on like the government stuff, but I still don't know our representative like in Congress. Like I don't even do I know any senator? Like I can't even off the top of my head. I can't even remember our senators,
Which is just like a
which sucks for me. But then also like for everyone, any other person, like I can bet
but
you
then
don't know.
that's the ass backwards like popularity contest that like the president position has become, right? It's like
Yeah, it
we
holds so much
aren't
power, but it shouldn't because again,
right.
there's no checks and
They're
balances.
not the end, right? At the end of the day, the power isn't really like they have a there's a lot of status attached to who they are, but the
Yeah,
power isn't just them. And they have
right.
to go through a lot of other things have to happen before any decisions can get to them. So it just seems like the people like the president being the person who's popular shouldn't be the person who's popular. It should be all of our local people who like we really know, who we see more. Like, and it's not the way it is on social media. And I guess in relations to other countries, I
Yeah.
understand if the person that they know the most is the president because that's who's representing us,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it even sadder when I say it out loud. But when it comes to like within our country, the
It's
president isn't
Congress.
representing us within our country. The president's like the local governments are what's representing us within our country, but that's not who we ever see.
No.
And it's like but that's also part of the problem with like the way that media works, right? Like you
Yeah.
get a president who makes so much turmoil, who is such like a media star, like that's who they're going to give the attention to, not the little guy in local government. But it's like
Even
that's
though
who
they're the
we
ones
need
making
to
laws.
change
Like
that. Right.
even
That's
though
what
they're the
needs to be
ones like
changed
writing
about
the
it.
laws. Yeah, yeah. I think
So like it doesn't really help that
it
you
doesn't
don't
help that
when you try to go on to stuff like that. Yeah, that's the public figure that everyone sees all the time.
right. I feel like is it Schoolhouse Rock or whatever? The the Bill like little like cartoon that
Yes, Schoolhouse Rock. That's so funny because we're like trying to do that show this year.
people need to just watch that little cartoon for like a hot second, just to remind themselves who makes the bills, how the law gets passed, all the checks and balances. It's a very
Honestly though, like, let's be realistic, like, but you don't just have to watch like education, like freaking like Legally Blonde talks about bills. Like, it's not like it has to be such an obscure thing. Like, that's literally one of the first ways that I actually remember, like, I could tell you like what has to happen in the process because of Elle Woods.
Honestly, what an iconic film.
No shame. Right. Like, really though, like, no shame at all.
Yeah.
It was one of the, like, and like it makes it relatable information, because otherwise when we're just talked about it, was like, the processes are not fun. Like, it's boring information, and the way that we're taught about it is boring information. So it's like having something like that that's actually fun and entertaining. Like, I'll never forget Bruiser's Bill.
Exactly. And like, you don't have to go buy like 5 different textbooks on like government. Like, it's
and that's part of the problem too. If that's the something that is so involved, like, that we have to be so understanding of and so engaged in, shouldn't be like a secret that you have to be like a certain level of educated to know about. You know what I mean? Like, it should be public knowledge. It should be very well out there. And like, you're right, like YouTube is a great
resource.
It's a great way to be able to understand it. But again, like, who's getting encouraged to go on YouTube to you know what I mean?
And also, who has the time,
it's
right?
Not right. It's not what's being put out there. Like, it's not what's being.
It's only highlighted during election
or
year. Right. Yeah. And even during election year, it's just a presidential again, because congressional seats go up every 2 years. So really, it should just be a constant stream of, this is what you should do every election. These are your candidates, etc., etc.
And then we can get into the whole electoral college and like how, at the end of the day, like, you should really understand how like your vote means more with congressional votes and other votes. So it's like you should really be getting involved in those too.
I can really, like, I remember in college when I was learning about all this stuff, when we were learning, because like high school civics and like middle school civics and just like, it's like lackluster. Like, you don't want to fucking, like, you don't care because you don't have a voice.
Don't you remember being in that class while we used to sing? Were you in that class with me when we were in 8th grade? I remember just singing Boys Like Girls a lot and getting like things like markers thrown at us by our teacher.
At that age, you don't care. Like,
right. What else the thing too is you don't have, at that point, like, that's when you don't get to vote. So
yeah, and like, I didn't really listen. Like, we knew the basic, like, all right, there's checks and balances, and like there's 3 branches of government, but beyond that, it's like, all right, there's a constitution, like, we declared independence, like, okay, like, great. But then like in college, obviously, in that, like, I could vote, like, all this stuff, and like I took a lot of these political science class, and I was like, oh shit, like, our vote counts more in the local and state elections rather than the presidential. And the electoral college is so archaic to me. Like, that's my stance on the electoral college, is very archaic. But there was a court ruling, I don't know how many months ago now, that said that electoral college members have to vote based on the popular vote in their respective region, and if they don't, then they get fined. Only some states actually had that as a law, not all 50, but I think it was a federal thing this year that you have to vote in accordance with your popular vote in your region or whatever college that you have. So at least that kind of, yeah, I mean, yeah, I get it. But also the way that, because I don't even know how the electoral college is split. It's so fucking weird how it's like spread out, and
the way it's weighted, like, too, is like not.
Yeah, because like the population, the way that each electoral college vote is not truly based on popularity vote because of the way that it's split. So it's like the whole like Bush versus Gore thing back in 2000. That whole thing happened with Florida.
That was, I feel like, one of the first times that I remember like there being an outright like, okay, why did this happen? You know, like investigation into like how that had happened. And that was the first time that I feel like I ever remember hearing people outright be like, well, this system, like this electoral college system we have set up is not like
right, because like it just seems so, like, intuitively you think, all right, Gore had more popular votes like compared to Bush. Okay, he should have won. But the way that it's split up by electoral college, like, he didn't. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think everyone got voter discouraged, because they're like, all right, my vote doesn't count then. And that's why there was such a bad turnout the following years. I feel like it just keeps getting worse and worse because, like, okay, this electoral college is still a thing. Why does it matter to me? And then that just discourages them, not from the presidential vote, but also the local.
Right. And I feel like that's I don't remember anybody growing up ever telling us that how important it was for us to vote for local elections, for us to vote for congressional elections. I only remember people ever being like, once you turn 18, you can vote for the president. And that was like what was glorified. And that's part of the problem too. Is like then what's more frustrating is like you tell us that it's a glorified thing, and then you all like everyone feels really smacked in the face when you're like, well, this is stupid because it's like you have the opposite effect, right? Like if people start to feel like their vote doesn't count, then they're like, well, what's the point of this? But like you still have power in voting. It's just that it's not just about the presidential election. It's about all of the other elections that lead up to it. Because at the end of the day, and this is like I heard this explanation a couple of different times. Like the way you vote on a local level affects who sits on the higher levels, all the way up to the presidency. That's how it works. And like
that's how it works.
We focus on like the top of that ladder when we need to be focusing on the bottom.
The trickle down effect. Right. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and then we get mad when something falls on our heads from the top, and it's like, well, you didn't look at any of the rungs on the bottom. Again, it's a part of how dysfunctional the system is, and our education and our like instant access and how we see the system.
You don't really learn how long these congressmen are in Congress until you take like higher level, and it sucks that like college courses are like very like high school, like I don't think it's in the curriculum to go into local and state, and
it's bullshit because we shouldn't be paying colleges to teach us that should be free education.
That should be all right, like we the people, like okay, this is our government,
you have a right to this education.
It should be taught to like high school kids, middle school kids, like every year. But
not even it should be like a free access thing that people can like you know what I mean, like they can
above thing, like
right, like they can just see and go to. And I mean, like you do, like you said before, like who has like people might not necessarily have the time to do that, but like giving them the information and pushing, and we do that a lot more, like pushing why it's important. Like we have a lot more of that, but it's not as loud as all the other BS we see.
No, it's not as loud as the presidential election, just the presidents in general. But so you don't really notice how long some of these congressmen are in Congress for. Like they shouldn't be, there's a term, like you shouldn't be like a lifelong like politician. Like you shouldn't be like a career politician. Like you shouldn't be in Congress for 30 years. Like when you first got into Congress 30 years ago, like politics is different. Like every cycle. So people like AOC who got nominated and won, like those are the people that should be representing the millennials and Gen Z people that are coming up. Like it shouldn't be a baby boomer, like it shouldn't, like
who's not at all in touch with the people who are going to be leading the country.
Right, correct. And like if it is, like they're clearly not in tune with the general population. That's why like it's such a struggle looking at Congress are all still white old men. Like the population is not white old men. Like it's clearly people like us and like BIPOCs and just like like it's not like it should be someone like younger now. But again, because people don't vote, they just win the seat automatically. That's the issue. So everyone just vote.
It's just so there's so much depth, and there's so many isms behind all of it. Like there's so much ageism, and then there's racism within it, and like there's just a lot. Like and I feel like it's what's so frustrating is like that's so much of where the battle between the ages and the generations really comes from, is because like when it gets to the point where it's like, okay, well, why don't we have more younger people leading our country? They're like, well, they pull out all the people who are like the most ignorant of us, right? And they use them as representation of an entire generation. And then we're like, cool. So you guys are stupid and you're young and you don't know anything. So you can't do this. And then it creates a bigger issue. And then we are leading people who are so far like disconnected from, and then you have like this is why we have the fights about like global warming. This is why we have the fights about like what's happening to the earth and like And then the people who created the issue, the generation that creates the issue, continue to still ignore it, and they're leaving behind whatever we have to deal with. And like, this is not me saying like it's an entire generation's fault, but like it is, the earth wouldn't be in the situation it was in if the generations before us didn't make the choices they made. And like
right. You see,
the Industrial
California,
Revolution hasn't continued.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't be in these positions. And like, am I saying that we, like, our generations would have done it better? Like, no, like I understand it was the outcome of the times. It was what came before them. Like the Industrial Revolution changed everything, and we have mass production of everything, and we just were like, yay, humans, like great.
Right.
But like,
well, what did that do?
Have a right.
Like,
but that was the thing too, right? We were so focused on, we were so selfish, thriving on our own successes as a race.
Yeah.
That like we didn't care about what we were doing to the earth because we couldn't see that far ahead. We didn't have the science to prove anything. So like it's not about what happened, it's about what's happening now and what decisions are being made now.
Yeah.
And if you're choosing to ignore things and you're choosing to say like it's fine, or you're choosing to say, well, it's your problem, well then like you suck.
Yeah, like thanks for
right
that.
Like that's like the only thing that's the only thing that could possibly be said. Like the temperatures that are happening right now,
freezing,
like and the fires that are happening right now, and like the things that we're experiencing, like the storms and everything like that, like this, you can't say like none of this is normal. And like it's terrifying. And like if you don't choose to really acknowledge the issue and just like with the systems of elections, with what's happening, everything that stems down to choices that are made through politics, if you're ignoring the bigger issues, you're gonna have, and race too, like you're gonna have this constant struggle. And it's the thing that is super sad is that too many people are not taught to actually get educated on things. Too many people are just ingrained to listen to what's told to them, to build their beliefs and their egos off of what's just spoon-fed to them. And they're too, not to say they shouldn't be, like, they're too trusting of, like, the people who give them information.
Which is why I think, at least for the education of government, it should be taught different. Because, like, we're not, at that age from pre-K to, graduation of high school or whatever, we're not searching out more answers. We're just being spoon-fed shit. And if all we can come up and we've been out of school for however many years, if I can just come up with checks and balances, the Electoral College, and just basic all right, the Schoolhouse Rock Bill fucking cartoon, and that's all you remember of civics, that's not right. It should be more.
For a government that's about the people, it does a lot to make the people, it doesn't give the access and information to the people that it should. Yeah,
the only people that really know about politics are the people seeking out the knowledge, and which isn't
right. Or the
fair
people who are actively engaged in it.
Yeah, and it's not fair to the people that want to know but don't have the time because of personal commitments.
Right. Right. So there should be a better way to streamline it into the experiences we're getting. And that's the thing too, like you said, we idealize being a president from kindergarten.
Right, what do you want to be when you grow up? The president of the United States.
Because we're told
straight up
that's the greatest position you could possibly hold in the entire world.
Right, and yet Supreme Court justices have so much power, and kids don't think that that's attainable.
Right, but again, that's not what we're taught, right? And you're not going to be oh, I wonder what a congressman does as a kindergartner. The president's the person you see who gets the shiny little pin and gets their picture put on everything, and they're the person's that's the person you see, which again makes it scarier for me to think that in your head when you go, who's the person who I want everyone to see that represents me, that we have the president we have right now. That summing, period, nothing else, no other decisions. If I literally just had to go, this person is the best possible option that I could pick to represent me, or even not even best possible option. This person is the lesser of all evils on the that I would choose to put in, and that's the part that is utterly concerning to me.
I mean, back in 2016, that was the vote, right? The lesser of the two evils. That's what ended up happening, and that's why, though he did not get the popular vote either, again, it's the whole Electoral College's distinctions and whatnot. I think the sentiment was the lesser of two evils, and I think again, I guess it's the same way, but like more like tenfold.
But and that's like right. That's the
Actually, I
problem
don't
with the
know
way
if it's tenfold, but like it's still the same sentiment. I feel like
right. That's the problem with what the election, like, the media around the election does. Right. That's the decision. Like the last election, that's what we were forced to. That's how, like, I felt forced to think. This election already. This is how you're forced to think.
And can I just say, like, our system is a two-party system. I don't like. Yes, there are third parties. Like, yes, there's the Green Party, and all this stuff. But I have such strong feelings on third-party voting during presidential elections. Like, I just say don't do it, because that's less votes for either party. Like, if it's local and state, fine. Like, that's fine. You know what? It's better for them anyway if they win local and state.
But another part of the problem, right, is like we say that there's third parties, but it doesn't, like,
for us, no
scale of thing. Like, it's unfortunate. Like, you're just pulling away from
Republican Democrats,
which is something that also needs to be dealt with outside of the election time.
I 100% agree. I have such, like, again, nothing against third party voting for state and local. If we're talking about the presidency and millions of people vote third party, that could have been millions of votes that just swung the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. People who are like, I don't care who it is as long as it's not this person.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose to do a third party, then you're more likely to encourage that person, because anybody who's going to vote for that person is not going to change their mind. They're not going to third party vote. So, like, that's where it becomes an issue.
Roosevelt, back in 1912, this is a very famous case, was running for president. Woodrow Wilson was a Democrat, but also Taft was a Republican. So Roosevelt wasn't running, and then last minute he was like, "I'm running for president." So he split the Republican vote. So splitting, I'm not saying like the third party, I guess they do have that sort of power, but like voting for third party is kind of like how Roosevelt screwed up that election for the Republican Party, because then Woodrow Wilson
half went to instead of filling the cup all the way up for the Republicans, it got split between two, and the Democratic cup was full.
And like, sure, third party voting isn't splitting it 50-50, but even if it's like a few percentage points, for like at least 2016 when it was so split, that completely swung votes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like just like things like that, like, again, like our system is a two-party system. Like, I can't argue that enough, like, especially during the presidential election.
And it's like, that's the thing too, right? It's like, we're not saying that it should only be a two-party system, but the time for you to try to make it not a two-party system is not when you're actually voting for the election, because it's we're at the system of like, it's too late by that point. We need to be trying to make that happen way before the elections happen, because otherwise you're screwing with the votes.
The makeup of the votes, exactly. Like, and again, it would be more beneficial for third-party voters to vote in their state and local.
Yeah,
like, that's where all the resources go anyway, like to your state. Third-party voting to me is just like, don't vote. Just like, and like, I don't even encourage not voting, but like, like, it's during a presidential election.
So much more needs to happen before these elections actually happen, and that's not when people are excited or hyped up about them, because that's not when the media is covering them. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it all comes back to, first of all, the fact that like large media outlets have way too much influence on on everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Not saying whether they're true or false, but have way too much power.
Again, and I think because it's so scary to think about November. Like, I haven't, and like, we're young, right? But like, I can even feel with older generations, like, this is a pivotal moment in American history.
And the thing that's so frustrating about it, I feel like, is the lack of security in what the process is going to be like still. And we're so close. Like, I just heard in my town, somebody had just posted that there was like a drop-in ballot box like, placed outside of a building. And the first thought in my mind is like, it's unfortunate, but my first thought in my mind is not to trust it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, because even when you just said that, I was like, oh, I don't know if I trust that, because who's managing that?
I'm like, there are pictures of it out there, like,
and also, I don't like
it's
that.
It's just like in the middle of nowhere. It's so weird.
Having a public mail-in ballot like drop box, they can camp out there, and that's voter intimidation.
Oh, I know.
And like people, and like that violates the Voting Rights Act, in my opinion. Like I just feel like if you're intimidating people to vote either way during election day, like that's just a violation of rights. Like, and people, and you have like a public space to just drop off your ballot. Like, who says that they're not going to ask who you vote for?
Right.
And then intimidate you.
Who's going to protect people in that?
Who's going to protect you?
Moment,
right.
Which is unfortunate because that's literally your basic right as a citizen of this country. To have that. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot, but yeah, like someone was posting about it, and a lot of course, people were commenting like, "Who put that? Like, how do you know that that's safe? Like, who put that there?" Because it's just like literally like on the sidewalk,
just there,
this like public building, already, and for the fact that it's already there seems odd to me.
I think people are early voting anyway. They're getting their ballots in the mail, which is fine. So I would just mail it back.
Who's been watching it through all
and
of
who
that time?
has the lock to like who has the key if there's a
And the way, like, it literally, someone just, it's not like it's mounted to the floor. Like, it's literally just like this mailbox. It's like sitting there.
What if you just carry it and just like vote?
All questions, like all you need, like all things that I'm thinking while I'm looking at this picture. And I was like, this seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah. And like out of convenience, people will use that, right? Like if they're like, oh, like it's right there, why not? And if they're saying this is legit, then I'll believe it. But like, what if someone steals that? Or like does something stupid, right? Like that also is a violation of, voters' rights. Yep. But yeah, I think it's sad that the first thing we thought of was not to trust.
Right, like that says everything.
That says like a lot about everything. The voting system, honestly, just how we're voting. Like I think it's just like
very, very.
I really think it's ever since Bush versus Gore. Like that whole thing about the Electoral College and how Florida's votes and like they had to recount and all that stuff, like, and the Supreme Court had to vote and be like, all right, it was Bush that won. Like I think after that, like now what?
That's also like that whole scenario also created a lot of plays on that concept of like voter fraud and like voting conspiracies and like in like other outlets of like shows and movies and things that we've seen, like those are part of plots of a lot of things. So like it becomes a norm to see these things happen.
Yeah.
So like then within like a similar, like within a democratic system, so then the more commonly exposed we are to it, the more we almost are like expecting of it, or like the more we question what happens in real life because it's what we're so exposed to. So it's like, that was a pivotal moment where people never saw that before, right? People never considered that before. And the second you put that idea in somebody's mind and you're not pulling that string back out. I don't like the fact that never before have I ever felt like when I vote that I have to worry about the security of like my vote actually, like not even like whether it counts or not, like that conversation aside, like whether it actually gets submitted, whether it actually can be put in a position to potentially gather something was not ever something that we had to worry about before. And now that is like the concern before you even get to like.
Right. And like, I don't know why, I mean, I get why there was fear on the GOP side of like doing it all mail in, but I voted for the Democratic primaries and it was fine.
Yeah, no, I've been doing mail in by mail in vote for the past like 4 years. I never had an issue.
Yeah, and the fact that local elections and everything. Yeah, and the fact that now that they're freaking out about it, like, I mean, it's a scare tactic. Let's be real here. Like, that's like, that's borderline. That's just voter intimidation. I just don't. It's so discouraging when it comes from the top because they're the ones calling the shot and they're the ones again that are being shown on TV and saying all these things. And then now it's like, oh no, I don't want to vote. Like now it's just like, all right, we'll just leave it up to, I don't know, something.
If there's anything that we've seen in the last 4 years, it's very much that whatever standard it's set by the presidential candidate, like by the presidency, is a standard that's set for the rest of the country.
Yeah.
Because if the president does something that is deemed as offensive or politically incorrect or anything, it creates space for everybody else to feel like they can do whatever they want. And we've seen that in abundance in the last 4 years in devastating and saddening ways. That if nothing else, that is that's the level where my concern comes from. because the longer that this person is in office, the less F's they're going to give about what comes out of their mouth, even if that's even possible.
And not even
the more it's going to encourage other people to do the same thing. And like the thing that's annoying as hell at the end of the day is like he's not the brunt worker. He's not the dirty worker. He's not gonna, if something bad has to happen, he's not gonna be the one to go out there and do it. He's the big like he's the talker. The people who follow him are the people who will go out and do the dirty work that's being done right now. Is all mind games and manipulation. It's all verbal. And like it's seeping into the brains of people who are willing to take action. It only takes one person to do that.
Right. Agreed. I mean, you see it in the country. You see it with like his
the level of devastation that's happened in the last 4 years, where the situation
the last 4 years. Like, how about the last 6 months?
If that's like, if we're doing shorter spans of time and larger acts of concern, another 4 years, we're not gonna. Like, it's not gonna. It just.
Another 4 years would be detrimental, only because he knows this is his last go. So he's like, I'm not getting reelected. Like, all hell will break loose because, like, what is he gonna do? You know, like, and
it's not. But again, at the end of the day, it's not him, right? I mean, everybody else who's like, he's not gonna be in my. I won't have an excuse to get away with what I want to get away with anymore.
Right, that's true. And
that's
also,
what's concerning to me.
And like, I was talking to one of my friends, and not even just him, but like, I don't even know who's in his cabinet. People also don't know what the cabinet of like is. I feel like the president's cabinet, like the Secretary of State.
I mean, but let's be realistic though. That door has like been like this the whole time,
right? The whole time.
But again, like
if I can Google his cabinet, I bet you it can be.
I feel like it's so much like Wizard of Ozing and like magic shows.
Yeah,
like, look at me, like look over here and don't look behind me, or like look at this so that you don't really know what's going on. Like that's what I feel like all of this has been, like this mirage of distraction, so that we don't. People who give a crap and want to know what's happening still don't know what's happening.
No, because it's all hush hush. I feel like, or something,
which is like the exact opposite of what a democracy stands for. So at the heart of that, I agree. Don't understand. I think that we've like made this comment before. Like whatever your preference, for anyone who's listening, whatever your preference is.
I mean, because clearly you know what our preferences are.
Right. Like whatever your preference is. And I think I said this in like a previous episode. We don't care about, like, we're not going to shame you or say anything ignorant because of who you can vote for.
If you can justify, I think if you can justify why you support or don't support XYZ person, I don't mind.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, there are moments where I could sit back and be like, I could think of reasons why I wouldn't support the person that I'm likely going to vote for. But again, it's a lesser of two evils in my eyes. But like, I don't care about what your political standings are until you hit a point where you are personally making decisions that are oppressing or hurting or shaming or like intimidating other people. That's like a general rule that I live by, like a moral rule that I live by. It's like the same. You love who you want to love, right? Like vote who you want to vote for. I don't really care. But like the second that person is choosing to do something that's hurting other people and you can stand behind that, that's when,
that's when I need more.
I can't be as open.
Yeah, I will listen to any explanation that they give. But if I can judge it based on like, their explanation is like shitty, like
right. If you tell me that you like, if you were going to tell me that you're a supporter for a reason that oppresses anybody based on race, ethnicity,
if
background,
you straight up say
that
like
stuff, don't say anything else. Like the conversation.
That's when I stop listening.
And I'm not going to tell you don't have the right to feel that way. That's totally fine because that's, again, based off of your experiences and what you were taught. But that's not how I think. And if we cannot agree on that, we're not going to be over. And let's talk about something else.
Like I'll have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
Right. Like but it just gets messy. It just like when people support people that are clearly oppressive against like, any marginalized, group, it gets messy because it's like, how can you possibly justify that stance, right? Like educational, like I've gotten like, oh, I support him because he's different. I'm like, all right, can you expand on that? Like, what do you mean? Like, oh, because he's a businessman, not a politician. I was like, all right, but politicians
I
in
remember
politics.
that initial thought when he first stepped into the ring. Everyone was like, wow, we're gonna get something different because he's never
I can
been.
smell that a mile away, though. I was like, but he's
never been in politics. I remember all of
he's
that.
not a good
And then
businessman, though.
Right. But again, like exactly, like that's what the reasons that he got to be where he got to be as a businessman is because he stole and cheated and lied.
And like
so
his dad was the better businessman anyway.
Yeah, and he tried to scam. Did you hear did you ever hear any of the interviews about the book that his mother wrote about him?
His mother or his niece? Because his niece just wrote one. And
no, the one that his mom wrote about him.
No,
I tried to scam his entire family out of the inheritance that they were supposed to get from his father.
I haven't heard it, but I can see that.
So like that's great, but like this is why you need to have context, like actual context to the things that we're hearing and seeing. And
I get the whole we need someone different, like obviously, right? Duh. But if you're basing it off of someone that has never been in, not even federal, like not even, like he hasn't been in local government, like he just has money. Not like I really couldn't believe. I still remember 2016 election night. Like I just when his votes kept like his electoral college votes kept going up, I was like, I can't believe that people fell for his,
that was all of us. We were like
his whole thing, like, oh, I'm different, we'll make America great again. I was like, isn't America great already? Like I just don't,
And
like,
that was my favorite part was the afterwards, and everybody was like, what part of great America are you going to go back to? Because some of it we've dealt with some shit. Like
I was like,
that was like one of the most amusing parts.
And like it's funny because that's still his stance, right? Like make America great again. Like people are still wearing those hats thinking that like, all right, it's been 4 years, isn't America great now? Like he did his time. Like one would think that like if you're standing for something when you're during your election period or whatever, you would think that by the time your election, like your 4-year period is over, like you made it great again.
Right, like you're different, you made your difference and you made your point.
You're still campaigning with that same campaign slogan. So you clearly haven't done what you thought you were going to do. If you're
this is also a big part of why,
like,
right now, the second that you bring up Make America Great Again, it directly attaches to like slavery and
you can directly see what kind of person
that latches onto it. And it's like I feel it in my chest as a businessman too. Like this is how, again, if you don't understand the way that like the economics of our society works, like if you're thinking let's go back to a time when like there wasn't recessions or that's the cycle of economics. There's never not a recession. So like you can't go back to that. If you're going to go back to when like the ways that I think about it, and this is because I've heard people say these things, is like, let's go back to when immigrants weren't taking our jobs. Like, first of all, you came from immigrants, stop talking. And then like,
unless you're Native American, you're an immigrant.
Right.
I don't care how many generations of American you are, you came here somehow and was not born here.
Your DNA is immigrant. Like that's what matters. Like your DNA is not from here. Like your DNA
even if you're like
sprout from the ground.
Even if you're one of our founding fathers was your great whatever, they also came from England. Like, like everything you're saying is false. And even so, they're not. We're actually not. Like, we're not taking your jobs.
And like that, right? Again, because
we're not taking your jobs. The jobs that are being taken are actually being just overseas outsourced.
And it's not like you're blaming something that's wrong with the system, that's wrong with what your country has on the people who are coming and trying to make something better. Like it's just all bullcrap. So like that's when someone says that, or like I see that hat in my mind based on the context that have come or the responses that have come from it and the things that people say in regards to it, I immediately like it makes me uncomfortable because then I think in some way, shape, or form that you are like an elitist. That you want to have yourself set up to be better. And like the only reason why you look up to him is because he is a rich white man. And that somehow want to be, right. You somehow want to be you want to have what he has. And you believe that by the graces of God that if you vote for him, he's going to somehow make you a wealthy white man too. Like,
and guess what? He didn't. And he didn't. And guess what? He actually screwed all of us over during COVID because he only gave us $1,200 for 6 months. And it's still continuing. Whereas other countries have been giving people allowances every 2 weeks for, hundreds of dollars. So really, he didn't make America great again, is my whole thing. And I can't believe, I think that's his campaign slogan. And if you're campaigning the same campaign that you did 4 years ago, you clearly didn't do your job.
Right. Well, not even like if you're focused on the past and not looking towards the future, you shouldn't be leading us. You're going to lead us backwards, which is literally what's been happening the past 4 years in every argument that's related to politics. We've just gone backwards, I feel like. And even so, the people who are standing up are fighting to push forwards while we're working against people who are trying to go backwards.
And whoever gets elected in November, there will be a recession. But if he does not get reelected, he's going to blame the Democratic Party for a recession. But as someone that is slightly knowledgeable very slightly knowledgeable in the stock market, and have been talking to people that are like knowledgeable in the stock market, our stocks right now are very inflated, which means that they're valued at a higher value that they should be right now. Yeah. So within months, those will tank. And I can believe that by November, it will be around election time. So either way, it's going to tank because I don't know how the stock market is doing so well during COVID when there are no jobs.
Right.
And it's an illusion that there's an illusion happening right now in the economy. And I feel like...
Yeah. I was hearing things about how companies, because companies are afraid of losing some of their best people because of COVID, they've increased their wages. And I'm thinking to myself, how is that even
it's counterintuitive.
How's that possible when their budgets are lower?
You would think right now, because it did dip, the stock market dipped in the very beginning of COVID, March, obviously, right? Because it just hit us like a fucking tsunami. It just it wiped everyone out. But you would think that it would keep going down because people are still out of jobs. Right. And no one's buying things. I don't know how the economy is surviving and thriving the way that it's being seen on, the stock market, which makes us...
Or either at the end of the day, even if it is able to keep going because people are spending money, they're not, the level of income isn't happening. So at some point that well's going to dry up and it's going to happen as a result of that, right? So at some point there's going to be an iceberg and the boat's going to hit it, whether we hit it already and we're just slowly leaking out as we're going, or we thought we hit it and we didn't really hit it.
Right. So, there's something happening. Obviously things are happening. Obviously we can't deny that, but come election day, I feel like there's a recession already in the works.
Yeah, everything's gonna the crack is gonna bust open.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't economic wise. It doesn't matter. I don't think who's gonna get elected. It's gonna happen eventually. I don't know if it's gonna be as bad as 2008, with the bubble, but I don't know. We'll see. But
it's gonna be another the title of this episode is "It's Too Late." It's gonna be another one of those moments where whoever's in the position to have to do something about it, should have been taken care of at the beginning of this year. So it should have been taken care of. We're just watching so much of what we've seen happening this year, and in everything related to what we've talked about today is a lot of we just are seeing the consequences of poor decisions that were, whether they were made by our founding fathers or they were made by people in the beginning of this year. We are watching the consequences unfold every single day.
I agree. It's terrifying. When RBG passed away, my phone blew up. I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
And for people that don't understand the legacy that she left behind and her importance in American politics, even though she's not a politician.
And the levels of engagement she had.
If
in people, she was just engaged in people. She just wanted people, the betterment of people.
Equality. She wanted equality for women, and as a woman, the loss of her, and she fought for equality till her deathbed, is what it is. But if you weren't struck by her death, then you clearly don't know the significance of our government. I feel at that end point. If you're oh, that sucks, all right, Supreme Court, like, that sucks. Like, you clearly don't understand her policies and her dissenting opinions and, like, her stances on things and how that changed our reproductive rights and, you know, discrimination stuff, like, for women.
Yeah, and it'll be really sad when you can't appreciate it when we have it, but you'll grieve the loss of it when you see what else happens now. You know what I mean? Like, what could
she balanced out
now.
that court. She balanced out. Yeah. She didn't really balance out, but, like, she made her opinions known.
Yeah.
In the Supreme Court, and, you know, thankfully she swung some votes from the conservatives these past, like, couple decades she was in the court. So it's like she played a big role. Granted, like, you shouldn't. She was like 87, like an 8-year-old woman. Just like, she's the one that's making a difference in our Supreme Court. Like, and granted, I'm not belittling the other justices, like, obviously, but she's been so outspoken in her whole career that, like, that's the first person you think of in that court system. But it's so fucked up how, like, just one person, and now we're like, fuck, our government is screwed. Like, it should be all of Congress, all the courts.
There should be another point guard on that team that we could go to.
Right, exactly. Like, now who? Like, all right, like, it shouldn't just be, but, like, that again, it's like the president, like, it's one person.
Like 20 years from now, when we go back and we watch these videos and we're like, well, this is what the world was like, because we're so, like, in it. You know what I mean? Like, we are in the crap of, like, this like, we are well into it. Like, our parents dealt with wars, and, like, we're dealing with wars and wars on our ground, and, like, all levels of different types of battles were happening up in this crap. And, like, we are in the, like,
prime time.
The crap of the crap. Have you ever heard of, like, the analogies of, like, the lotus flower?
No. No.
So, like, lotus flowers in, like, yogic philosophy and, like, Hindu philosophy they only will bloom in, like, mud, and, like, they feed off of, like, disgusting things so that they can flourish. Yeah. Like, we are in the gross of everything right now, and, like, I'm hopeful that there will be, like, a beautiful flower that emerges one day, but I would really like for us to still be alive when that flower happens.
Whether the earth
that's what I'm hoping. Like,
whether the earth with climate change takes us, or some form of other destruction.
Did you ever? So this is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies. Is Hercules.
Oh, that's in my top 3.
Like, just for all reasons, for the music, for the characters, for the storyline, so many things. And for some reason, you know, what are they even called? Like those like those like big scary gods he has to battle. What are they called? They're from Greek mythology. It's gonna bother my brain. Ones that, like, Zeus brings out, or Hades helps escape from, like, another realm.
The ones that were, like, locked away for, like, years and years under in the underworld, and God escaped.
They're called something. What are they called?
I don't know what they're called, though. I can literally just see the scene of, like, they're, the like, cage coming out and they're all, like,
and, like, climbing and going after it. Like, that's I feel like when my anxiety set in, and, like, when I have some nightmares, like, I feel like Hercules, like, not to say, like, that I'm a hero in any way, shape, or form, but, like the people, like, all that are alive right now are Hercules, and, like, all of these, like, 7 crazy things are, like, coming after us all at once. Like, that's how it feels. And, like,
every direction, absolutely.
Like, we don't have the capabilities or the strength or, like, the anything to stand up, like, to do anything about it. No. Because it all is just coming at us. Like, that's
every day there's something.
How it feels. It's like the same analogy, right? It's all these monsters that we've kept as a country, have kept, and, like, race and existence of human beings have kept locked away in another realm, trying to ignore for years and years and years and years. And every time we saw them become relevant, we just, like, push them back down again. And it just hits a point where all 7 monsters together, right? Like, not 7, but, like, all monsters together are more powerful than we are.
Yep.
And, like, they are going to overwhelm us. They are overwhelming us.
It's overwhelming us right now.
Right. And, like, you still have to find the way to overcome it. And, like, the more that we fight with each other, the less we're going to do that. And it's just,
I just don't understand why we're fighting. What are we fighting against? Like,
people don't understand that. And, like, that is the disheartening part. Do I think it's possible for, like, human beings to overcome all of this stuff? Yes. Do I think that it's going to take like a lot of love and a lot of understanding and a lot of self-work that people don't want to do. Yes. Do I think that we've been in a position where like we act like there's such a split between like the people who are willing to do that and the people who judge the people who do that? Like that's the only ends of that spectrum. Like you're either somebody who has that awareness and you're willing to accept your flaws and you're trying to work through them and you want to be more understanding and you want to be better in that way. Or there are people who are had the door so closed on that and they're so judgmental about people who do that. Like at the end of the day, we're not fighting based on political decisions. We're not fighting based on race. We're not fighting based on religion. We're not fighting based on like belief in science or not belief in science. It's the people who are willing to be aware and learn and try and be loving and be empathetic are fighting against the people who are resisting that. Like that's because everything else is like superficial and is fake and not real. Like at the end of the day, like your energy is in the person that you are on the inside and like the soul of who you're being, right? Like your actual self. Our actual selves are what's fighting. We're just putting a bunch of these like filters on top of it to give us an excuse to say that why we should.
Right.
And until that changes, we're going to keep doing this.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So that is why Maria and I get on here and like we talk about these things and like we make each other like have to get, and like I said last week, like we make ourselves be in these situations that feel uncomfortable and we have these conversations knowing that people aren't going to agree with us, and that's totally fine. But like more people need to start showing up in so many different ways and talking about these things so that we can realize and show other people that you can do this and be okay. And it is the only way that we're going to get like forward. It's the only way we're going to have a future. Like literally, like you said, Maria, like the earth, at the end of the day, whatever power we have against each other, we have no power against like the earth.
Man, yeah.
Like meteor comes down, like we're all effed.
Yeah.
If these storms keep going the way that they're going with I saw today that there's like 6 of them in the Atlantic Ocean right now, like mega storms. And like, if this keeps going, we're not like nothing. It doesn't matter. Like none of this political conversation matters. It's so irrelevant. So it's like, why?
What are we fighting against? Like, what are we fighting against each other for? Like in like the political sphere, like why is it all of a sudden so far left versus so far right? Right? Like where is the distrust coming from? Like in the presidential election that this came to this. Like we're a laughingstock in the fucking world. And again, from Obama to him, like, and I didn't fully agree with 100% of Obama's like things, but also like
not me either.
Rather like who did like, and like I can't remember, and I don't know if I was just oblivious, but I don't remember his following being this obnoxious. Like I'm not, and even beforehand, like I don't remember Bush's followers being obnoxious. Like it always just had to be like, all right, he's the president, and it's not like, all right, our president.
Or it didn't go past.
I voted for Obama. Period.
Right. It didn't go past like language. Like I would. There were moments where like people would have like they would say things, right, or they would have a specific belief that came out of their mouth. But the amount of taking action towards belittling or endangering the lives of somebody who's not, that I never saw before.
No, it's outright violence. Like it's
right.
Like either way, whoever wins, there's gonna be violence. like I don't know if we're safe is the issue. I think that's what the fear stems from for November for the people that are following politics and have strong opinions, is that we don't know if we're safe either way.
Yeah. And it's funny, I was having a conversation last night with like somebody that we work with and we're friends with. Safety is a general issue that I have. Like I've had in my life is like a sense of like I have trust issues. So like I generally don't feel safe.
As a POC, I think safety is like, as any general BIPOC like person, like I think safety is our number one concern.
Right. And it's interesting to me because we were talking to somebody who's essentially from Africa, and she was saying how she grew up in a place where, you know, like thieves were common and people were constantly breaking into each other's houses, and she never really felt safe. And she was telling us stories about like people in her family getting robbed in like clear ass daylight. And it was like, I was sitting there going to myself, I was like, okay, well, I was like, that explains why you would feel unsafe, right? Like that's terrible,
Absolutely.
And she would say like, and she was like, I'm not mad at people who did that because we came from like, we lived in poverty. Like everyone lived in poverty. If you didn't steal, you had nothing to do. So like you had nowhere to feed your family. So like it was a clear, I feel this way because of this, and hers streamlined made total sense. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and I'm like, I have no reason to feel unsafe, but the levels of you know what I mean? Like legitimately, like never, none of that stuff ever happened to me. Not to say that I don't have the right to feel unsafe, but like compared to her story, like she had literal things that were happening to make her feel unsafe. I like that made sense. And to me, I'm thinking to myself, I've never been in a situation to that caliber where I had any reason to feel unsafe. But you take the levels of manipulation, right? Then you add in the expectancies that have been pushed on me about being a female, about being this, about being whatever. You take all of that, and it's like, this is what has been done. Like this is the things that were seeped into you about why you should feel unsafe. And now you take all of that and you put it out into like a place where you, as a citizen, right, like you should feel like you have a level of safety in enacting a right that you have, in making a choice, and feeling like there's some solid foundation for you to stand on.
Yeah.
And that just like ripped out from underneath you.
Right.
And
That's
it's
just
just,
what happened. But
it's BS for anybody to live in this country for any reason and have any level of feeling like, based on something that's coming from above, there's a level of like unsafety. But then all that our country preaches is literally the opposite.
But you can also, it sucks because when you flip it, the supporters also feel like they're unsafe. And
exactly.
That's the
part of the problem. We're unsafe together and mad at each other and telling each other that we're the reason why we're unsafe. And then we send people overseas to fight for the reasons that we have to feel secure and safe. And that's not even the case anymore.
Right. And I think the problem with like his supporters that have been so vocal for the past 4 years and continue to be vocal and will continue to be vocal until he probably dies, honestly, is the fact that their whole, I don't know, their stance, I guess, is that they were unsafe in this country. And seeing the general population of that, it's not everyone, it's not 100% of his followers, but like a majority of his followers are cis white men.
I was like, white people. You can just say it. It's the truth.
Straight white men, straight white female, whatever. What were you unsafe for? Like what? Because when you get an answer from them on what they felt unsafe like from, like what their safety issues were, it's clear discrimination. Like
clear.
It's so violent and it's so uncalled for. And those are the people that are running around doing this shit.
Isn't it super interesting that this is why I'm not saying that something is right for something being wrong, but I think it's extremely hypocritical for people who all of a sudden feel, people who are white and have privileges, to take actions that are violent and be like, it's because I'm unsafe, to criticize anybody who's not white, any person who's any other color, any other race, and be like, the second they get angry, the second they get vocal about being uncomfortable, they don't have the right to do that and they're doing it wrong. That whole thing, it's just like, you've been uncomfortable for the last 20 years, maybe the last 5 years of your life. Like, you're talking about generations of discomfort, generations of oppression, and you're telling people they don't. But what you said, the heart of what you said, yes, people are taking action and doing, you either take action based on fear or you based on love.
Right.
I'm a total believer of that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. Absolutely.
It's so just, like, people are, this is a lot of taking action on fear because people don't know what's going to happen. And like you said, they already feel unsafe for whatever reason they have. And not to say that you don't have the right to feel unsafe if you feel unsafe. I'm not saying you don't, like, I don't know your life, right? Like, I don't know your life, but if someone comes up to me, like one of them, and like I have a conversation with them and like, you know, it's going fine and whatever, and the reason why you voted for so-and-so and why you still, you know, support his rhetoric is because you feel unsafe, like your safety compared to, or like you feel unsafe because of something discriminatory, like, you know, immigrants, or like, you know, Black Lives Matter and shit, like it just invalidates it. It's just, now you're just being an oppressor. Like now you're
now your rhetoric and your stance in this earth, in this citizenship of the United States is you're just being an oppressor.
That's the scarier part to me, right? Is like sometimes you can just make yourself look uneducated by saying things like that, but then you take somebody who really comprehensively does have an understanding of the history of this country and still has that stance, then you're like, well, then
why?
For what other reason? What now? Like now it just clearly shows that that's like you have nothing else that's getting. If you're educated and you still take that stance and you really understand and you have the like you either lack the ability to be empathetic and considerate.
Right. And it's those people, right? Like it's those people. If you're saying to me, it's because I voted for him because of his economic policies, I can't fault you at that. What am I going to, like, that's fair. Like, I'm not going to say anything to you because, like, all right, we'll have a conversation about economic policies and we'll just, discuss and whatever. But if you're saying you voted for him because you felt unsafe and it's very, like, an oppressive standpoint, then I will fault you at that. Then that's when I get mad.
Yeah.
I don't mind, obviously, economic policies. I don't mind if you're talking about, your Second Amendment rights. That's also a thing that's very political. Like, if you voted for him because of that, fine. But again, if you're just being racist, I can't. Like, there's no room for me to even, like, hear what you're saying.
And that's the interesting thing too, is that you don't have to blatantly say like, you are not as good as me, or I don't think these people are as good as I am to be racist. You at all saying in any way, shape, or form that you're unsafe and that your safety is more important than the safety of somebody of color, you are actually being racist. Like you're being racist.
That's
like,
actually racist.
Right. Like whether you realize that or not, that way's worse because you might not even realize that it's actually racist for you to say it that way because you're taking it from a standpoint of I. And again, part of the problem is that you are so worried about yourself and don't have the ability to be sympathetic to or empathetic to somebody else's experiences.
People just don't.
The level of awareness it takes to actually sit down and be like, well, how do I feel? And like, do I think you're a terrible person if like you have a moment where you feel that way? No, I think that you were probably taught that. That was your experiences.
Right.
It becomes your responsibility.
Deeper.
Right. It becomes your responsibility to then do something about it afterwards.
Right, because I know very close friends of mine that grew up in households that just racist. Like, let's just be blunt here. Like, their parents are racist. But it took them realizing and being put in positions where they have friends, they have coworkers, they have colleagues that are not white or not of their race to figure out that what they've been taught for so long is wrong. And like that takes a lot of time and effort on their part, and probably these people didn't have. It's the people that are in like the Midwest. Let's be real here, and like the southern states that like aren't in like a diverse community that don't have the capacity, like the mental capacity to even think about other races because all they see is one. I think that's the issue, right? Like the fact that you're not exposed to other races and other cultures, like in a country that has all the races and cultures possible like in the world and not being exposed to it and only thinking about yourself is the problem. Is why this happened.
This would be so much easier if we all just had chips in our brains by now and then I could be blissfully unaware,
just ignorant,
right? Like just blissfully ignorant. Like
it
must be so much easier to just be ignorant to things.
No, I think it's so much easier if you're a kid because then it doesn't affect you. This goes back to learning civics in 7th grade. Like it doesn't really affect you, so why do you care?
Right? And then you become an adult and you're like, oh.
Like, fuck, I should have listened.
Either way, whatever happens in politics, Maria and I will be here.
Complaining about it.
Complaining
about it either way.
Breaking shit apart.
Yeah.
That's the wonders of this country, right? Is that whatever decisions are made, we've got something to say about them. Either way. And
again, like, I can't talk to anyone that if their opinion is just oppressive in any sort, then I can't help you. That's the whole thing. I will talk to Trump supporters if it's because their economic policies are different from the Democratic Party. Like, that's fine. I've had those conversations. It's not a big deal. But if you're telling me that your sole reason why you voted for him is because of oppressive ideas, then I cannot. End of story. That's it. I'm done.
So, rest in peace.
Yeah, rest in peace. Everyone watch
RBG.
that documentary. If you want, it's called RBG. It's very good. It literally explains why the Supreme Court well, it doesn't really all explain, but it explains why the Supreme Court is very important.
Yeah, and the power that it holds
power
within
that
our government processes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully in the next week or two, we will have more people on, more guests. If you guys enjoy the episodes that we've done in the past, we've had quite a few guests on our show.
Yeah. And
up to this point.
Up.
If you enjoy, yes, we have more people lined up. So if you enjoy us having guests on, please let us know. Show them some love.
All right,
and I will see you next week.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye everybody. Thanks so much for listening or watching us, or however you
consume your media.
Ooh, I like that. You're gonna save that. All right, adios.
Bye.